The Galactic Council had watched Earth for 300 years. They had studied humans from far away, watching them fight wars, build cities, and reach for the stars. The Council was made of 400 species from across the galaxy. They had ruled for thousands of years, and they believed they knew everything about every creature in the universe. They were wrong about humans. On a cold morning, in the year 2347, 17 massive ships appeared in Earth's sky. They were Thalaxian warships, painted in the gold and purple colors of the Galactic Council. Each ship was bigger than a mountain, and they blocked out the sun as they moved into position above the planet's major cities. Commander Katie Morgan was eating breakfast when the alarm went off. She was 42 years old, with short gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. She had fought in the Mars colonial uprising 10 years ago, and she had promised herself she would never fight again. But when she saw those ships on the screen, she knew the promise was about to break. She ran to the bridge of the Earth Defense Vessel Horizon. Her crew was already at their stations, their faces pale with fear. Lieutenant Danny Vance, her tactical officer, was a young man with shaking hands. He had never seen an alien ship before. None of them had. The message from the alien fleet came through in perfect English. The translation software had done its work well. A creature appeared on screen, tall and thin with blue skin and 3 black eyes. It called itself Ambassador Zethver of the Thalaxian Collective. The ambassador's message was simple. Earth had been selected to join the Galactic Council as a Category 3 species. This meant humans would work in council mines and factories. They would serve in council armies. They would obey council laws. If Earth refused, 3 major cities would be destroyed as a demonstration of council power. Katie listened to every word. Her face showed nothing. Inside, something old and cold was waking up. It was something that had slept in human blood for 1,000,000 years, passed down from ancestors who had hunted across the plains of Africa with nothing but sharp sticks and endless patience. She asked Danny one question. How long until the planetary defense grid could target all 17 ships at the same time? Danny's fingers moved across his console. 14 minutes, he said. Katie opened the channel to the alien fleet. She smiled warmly at Ambassador Zethver. She thanked him for visiting Earth and asked if they might have a few minutes to prepare a formal response to such an important offer. The ambassador had seen this before. Every species reacted the same way when faced with council power. They begged for time to accept their fate. He allowed 20 minutes for the humans to prepare their surrender. Katie closed the channel and sent a signal to every military base on Earth. The signal was 4 words that had been prepared years ago by people who had always known this day would come. The words were simple. Operation Sleeping Giant is active. Across the planet, soldiers ran to their stations. Ships that had been sleeping in hangars roared to life. Weapons that had been hidden underground rose toward the sky. Every rail cannon, every missile battery, every orbital defense platform received its orders. At Luna Command, Admiral Greg Patterson watched his screens light up with target locks. He was an old man who had spent his whole life preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now that it was here, he felt strangely calm. At minute 30, the defense grid was ready. Every weapon on Earth and in orbit had a target. The alien ships sat in the sky like fat birds, completely unaware of what was about to happen. At minute 14, Katie stopped smiling. She opened the channel to Ambassador Zethver one more time. She told him that humanity had prepared their response. Then she gave the order to fire. The sky turned white with the light of 1,000 weapons firing at once. Rail cannons sent metal slugs through alien hulls at impossible speeds. Missiles exploded against shields that had never been tested against human weapons. Laser batteries cut through armor Like hot knives through butter. 11 of the 17 ships died in the first 3 seconds. They broke apart and fell toward Earth in burning pieces. The remaining 6 ships tried to run, but their engines would not respond. Their jump drives were offline. Their communications were dead. Dr. Henry Cole sat in a basement office 3,000 miles away, watching his virus do its work. He was a quiet man who had worked in computer security for 30 years. He had spent the last decade studying alien communications, preparing for this exact moment. The virus had been uploading since the aliens first entered Earth's communication range. It had spread through their systems like poison in blood. The remaining 6 ships were captured within the hour. Marines boarded them through holes cut by precision lasers. The fighting was short and brutal. Humans, it turned out, were very good at close combat. The aliens had not expected that Ambassador Zethfer was taken alive. Katie had given orders that he was not to be harmed. She had plans for him. They put the ambassador in a comfortable room with good food and soft chairs. Katie visited him the next day. She sat across from him and asked politely if he would share information about the Galactic Council. Zethfer refused. He was a diplomat, not a traitor. He would die before betraying his people. Katie nodded as if she understood. Then she had Dr. Cole play back every private conversation Zethfer had held with his officers since entering the solar system. Every secret, every plan, every moment of doubt. The ambassador's 3 eyes went wide. His confidence crumbled like sand. He began to talk. The council, he explained, ruled hundreds of species across 3 arms of the galaxy. They had never lost a first contact. They had never faced resistance. They had protocols for everything except a species that fought back. Katie asked where the council's capital was located. Zethfer told her it was in the Verus system, 42 light-years away. Katie thanked him for the information. Then she told him something that made his blue skin turn pale. She told him that humanity was coming to visit. Word spread across Earth within hours. Humans had won their first battle against an alien empire. But Katie knew this was just the beginning. The council would send more ships. They would send armies. They would try to crush humanity like they had crushed hundreds of species before. But humanity was different. Humans were persistent predators. Their ancestors had hunted by chasing prey until it died of exhaustion. They did not need to be faster or stronger. They just needed to never stop. The council had made a terrible mistake. They had awakened something ancient, something hungry, something that would chase them across the galaxy until the hunt was finished. Katie looked at the stars and smiled. The hunt had just begun. The news reached the Galactic Council in 3 days. High Counselor Varath Annie sat on her crystal throne and listened to the report with growing horror. She was 2,000 years old, a being made of living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. She had ruled the council for centuries. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had never heard anything like this. 17 ships, gone, destroyed by a species that could not even travel faster than light. A species they had classified as barely intelligent. Counselor Next of the Vormak hegemony demanded immediate revenge. He was a large creature covered in thick scales, and his voice shook the chamber when he spoke. "Send 200 ships," he said. "Burn their planet to glass. Make an example of them so no other species would dare to resist." The council agreed. 200 warships began moving toward Earth. But then came the second report. 3 council outposts in nearby star systems had gone silent. When scout ships arrived to investigate, they found the outposts empty. Every piece of equipment had been taken apart and removed. Every computer had been copied and erased. Every weapon was gone. The humans had left behind one message at each location, written in perfect Talaxian script. The message said, We learned fast. High Counselor Vareth Annie felt fear for the first time in 1,000 years. On Earth, the captured alien technology was being studied day and night. Dr. Henry Cole led a team of 400 engineers working in shifts. They never stopped. They never rested. They pulled apart alien machines and learned their secrets. Within 6 months, they had working jump drives that could cross light years in seconds. Within a year, they had made the drives faster and more efficient than the original designs. The aliens had spent centuries developing this technology. Humans had improved it in months. Admiral Katie Morgan oversaw the building of humanity's first interstellar fleet. The ships were not pretty like council vessels. They were ugly, angular things covered in weapons. They looked like predators. The first ship was named the Defiance, and Katie made it her home. She gathered her senior officers around a table covered in star maps. Captain Nate Bishop was a former fighter pilot with quick eyes and steady hands. Dr. Sandra Liu was the fleet's medical officer and knew more about alien biology than any human alive. Lieutenant Commander Amy Ross was their intelligence expert, the one who had broken Ambassador Zethfar's will. Chief Engineer Paul Martinez was the man who had made the alien jump drives run better than ever before. Katie explained the plan. They would not attack the Council directly. Instead, they would hurt them slowly. They would strike supply ships and communication relays. They would hit outposts and small colonies. They would make the Council bleed from 1,000 small wounds while humanity grew stronger. Some officers questioned the plan. Why not strike at the heart now, while they had surprise on their side? Katie shook her head. Surprise was a weapon that could only be used once. The Council did not understand how humans thought. Every day that passed was a day humanity learned more about the enemy. Every battle taught them something new. The first attack came 3 months later. A Council supply convoy of 32 ships was traveling through the Karath system. They had an escort of 12 warships, and they felt safe. Captain Nate Bishop led the attack. The Council ships formed their standard defensive formation, waiting for humans to charge at them from the front. Nate did not charge. He flew around them instead, while the Council ships waited for an attack that never came. Human vessels dropped out of jump space behind the convoy. They began destroying supply ships one by one, picking them off like wolves hunting sheep. By the time the escort ships realized what was happening and turned around, half the convoy was already gone. The humans jumped away before they could be caught. The Council lost 32 ships and enough supplies to feed a colony for a year. Humanity lost nothing. This pattern repeated again and again over the following months. The Council would send ships to one place, and humans would attack somewhere else. They would gather their fleets for a big battle, and humans would simply refuse to fight. They would hit undefended targets instead. High Counselor Vareth Annie called an emergency meeting. She asked her military advisors a simple question. What were the humans doing? Nobody could answer. Humans were not fighting like any species the Council had ever met. They were not trying to hold territory. They were not trying to protect their planet. They were not trying to talk. They were just hunting. A young analyst named Kethver finally spoke. He was the brother of the captured ambassador, and he had spent months studying everything the Council knew about humanity. He had read their books, watched their shows, and learned their history. Humans, he explained, were something called persistence predators. On their home planet, they had hunted animals not by being faster or stronger, but by never stopping. They would chase their prey for hours, for days, until the animal simply collapsed from exhaustion. The Council, Kethver said, had awakened something very old and very dangerous. They had reminded humans what they truly were. The room fell silent. The war continued. Human ships appeared without warning, struck hard, and vanished before anyone could respond. They captured alien technology and used it against its creators. They learned the Council's codes, their tactics, their weaknesses, and then they began to make friends. The Verati were a reptilian species conquered by the Council 600 years ago. They had been forced to work in mines, digging for metals that powered Council ships. When human soldiers liberated their world, the Verati asked only one question: how can we help you destroy them? Katie gave them ships and training. Within months, Verati raiders were striking Council targets with the same relentless energy as human forces. Then came the Alari, a gentle species of mind readers who had been used by the Council as living lie detectors. When they learned the full truth of Council crimes, their gentle nature turned to cold fury. They became humanity's best spies, able to sense enemy thoughts and emotions. More species joined the fight: the Tarvek, the Asini, the Malachi. Each one brought new knowledge, new resources, new reasons to hate the Council. By the end of the second year, 14 species had united against their former masters. They called themselves the Coalition of Free Species, and they followed Admiral Katie Morgan into battle. High Counselor Varthani watched her empire crumble piece by piece. She made a decision that would prove fatal. She ordered the construction of a massive battle station in the Council's home system. It would be the largest structure ever built, capable of defeating any attack. But building it would require resources from across Council space. Ships and soldiers would be pulled from dozens of systems to protect the construction site. Lieutenant Commander Amy Ross intercepted the plans within days. She brought them to Katie with a smile. "They are putting everything in one place," Amy said. Katie smiled back. It was the first time she had smiled in a long time. The hunt was entering its final phase. 2 years had passed since the first alien ships appeared over Earth. The Galactic Council still controlled more than 400 star systems. Humanity and its allies controlled less than 20. By normal thinking, the war should have been easy for the Council to win. But normal thinking no longer worked. Admiral Katie Morgan stood on the bridge of the Defiance, reading reports that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. Human forces had destroyed more than 3,000 Council ships. They had freed 19 species from Council control. They had turned the galaxy upside down. The Coalition of Free Species had grown into something powerful. The Verati provided soldiers who fought without fear. The Alari provided intelligence that let the Coalition know what the enemy was planning before the enemy knew it themselves. The Tarvek built weapons that human engineers could barely understand. The Asini flew ships with a skill that made even Captain Nate Bishop jealous. Together, they had become something the Council had never faced: a united force of species that refused to be slaves. High Counselor Varathani had bet everything on her battle station. It was being built in the Verith system, the heart of Council space. When finished, it would be the size of a small moon, armed with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. She believed it would turn the tide of the war. She did not understand that she was doing exactly what Katie wanted. For 6 months, Coalition forces changed their tactics. Instead of hitting supply lines, they began attacking shipyards and factories. Instead of avoiding big battles, they started accepting fights they knew they could win. Council ships were being destroyed faster than new ones could be built. The Council saw this as desperation. They believed humanity was throwing everything into one last attack before the battle station was finished. They rushed construction even faster, pulling more ships and more resources to the Verith system. They did not see the trap closing around them. Dr. Sandra Liu had spent those 6 months working on a secret project. She was not building a weapon that exploded or a virus for computers. She was creating something far more terrifying. The founders were the species that led the Council. They were beings made of living crystal, like High Counselor Varathani. They lived for thousands of years and believed themselves superior to all other life forms. Every important position in the council was held by a founder. Sandra had studied their biology from captured samples. She had learned how their crystalline bodies worked. And she had created a virus that could put them to sleep forever. The virus was not designed to kill. It was designed to trap the founders in a state between life and death. They would not wake up. They could not be healed. They would simply exist, frozen, until someone gave them the cure. Only Sandra knew how to make the cure. Katie asked her one question before approving the weapon. "Can it be reversed?" Sandra nodded. "Yes," she said, "but only by me." Katie understood. The virus was not just a weapon. It was a threat, a bargaining chip, a way to win the war without destroying an entire species. The final attack began on a morning that had no name, because in space there is no day or night. Coalition ships gathered at the edge of Council space, 200 vessels from a dozen different species. Human ships flew alongside Verati cruisers and Alari scouts. For the first time, the galaxy saw what cooperation looked like. Admiral Morgan gave a simple order: jump. The fleet appeared in the Verus system like ghosts. The battle station hung in space ahead of them, massive and terrifying, but still incomplete. Its weapons were online. Its shields were active, but it was defended by only 50 ships. A skeleton crew left behind while the main Council fleet chased shadows in distant systems. The battle began. Coalition ships swarmed around the station like angry insects. Laser beams cut across the darkness. Missiles exploded against shields. Ships died on both sides, but the Coalition had more ships and better tactics. Chief Engineer Paul Martinez sat at his station on the Defiance, waiting for the right moment. He had spent 2 years studying Council technology, learning its secrets. He had found a weakness in their systems, a backdoor that nobody had noticed before. When the station's shields started to fail, Martinez transmitted a single command. It spread through the station's computers like fire through dry grass. The shields dropped completely. The weapons went silent. The lights flickered and died. The station was helpless. Coalition Marines boarded the station within the hour. Captain Nate Bishop led them personally, fighting through corridors filled with Council soldiers. The fighting was brutal and close, the kind of battle that humans had been winning since they first picked up sharp rocks 1,000,000 years ago. They found High Counselor Verath Annie in her chamber at the heart of the station. She was surrounded by guards who surrendered the moment they realized their weapons no longer worked. She stood tall and proud, but her crystal body flickered with fear. Katie came aboard to meet her enemy face to face. Verath Annie was ancient and beautiful and terrible. She glowed with blue light that had shone for 2,000 years. She had ruled the galaxy before humans had learned to write. She looked at Katie like Katie was an insect that had somehow learned to speak. Katie showed her a small glass tube. Inside was a purple liquid that seemed to move on its own. She explained what it was. She explained what it would do. She explained that it could be released into the air systems of every Council installation in the galaxy. Every founder, everywhere, would simply go to sleep and never wake up. Verath Annie asked what Katie wanted. Katie told her. Unconditional surrender. Every enslaved species freed. Payment for the damage the Council had caused. And a promise that the Council would never threaten another species again. Verath Annie asked what would happen if she refused. Katie looked at her with eyes that had seen too much war. Dr. Liu is waiting for my signal, she said. You have 1 hour to decide. The High Counselor thought about her choices. She could refuse and watch her entire species fall into endless sleep. She could fight and lose everything. Or she could surrender and hope that humans were merciful. She had believed humans were weak. She had believed they were primitive. She had believed they could be controlled. She had been wrong about everything. 12 minutes later, I, Council of Earth Annie, knelt before a human for the first time in 2,000 years. She spoke the words of surrender in a voice that shook with emotions she did not have names for. The war was over. Across the galaxy, Council ships received the order to stand down. Soldiers who had fought for generations laid down their weapons. Slaves who had never known freedom looked up at the sky and wondered what would happen. Next, Katie stood on the station's observation deck and watched the stars. She had won the war. She had freed billions of beings from tyranny. She had done the impossible, but she knew this was not the end. Winning a war was easy compared to what came next. Now she had to build a peace that would last. She turned away from the stars and went back to work. There was still so much to do. The Galactic Council had surrendered. For the first time in thousands of years, the galaxy had no master. Species that had been slaves for centuries suddenly found themselves free. Nobody knew what would happen next. Admiral Katie Morgan faced a problem harder than any battle. Winning wars was something humans understood. Building lasting peace was something humans had always struggled with. She called a meeting on a large space station that floated between the stars. The station had once been a council trading post where merchants from dozens of species came to buy and sell goods. Now it became something new. Representatives came from more than 100 species. Some were tall and thin. Some were short and wide. Some flew, some crawled, some floated in tanks of strange liquid. Many of them had never been allowed to speak for themselves before. Many of them hated each other because the council had taught them to hate. Katie did not take charge. She did not claim leadership. Instead, she stood before the gathering and made a simple proposal. Every species, she said, would have an equal voice. It did not matter if a species controlled 100 worlds or just one. It did not matter if they had powerful weapons or none at all. Every voice would count the same. The representatives argued. They shouted. Old enemies accused each other of terrible crimes. Species that had suffered under council rule demanded revenge against species that had helped the council rule. The meeting nearly fell apart a dozen times. Katie let them argue. She understood that these species needed to find their voices. They had been silent for so long. They needed to learn how to speak again, even if speaking meant shouting. After 3 weeks, the arguments reached the point where nobody could agree on anything. The question was simple, but impossible. Who would enforce the rules? Who would stop species from attacking each other? Katie finally spoke again. She proposed creating a peacekeeping force made up of soldiers from every member species. No single species would control it. Leadership would rotate every year. The force would exist only to stop wars and protect members from outside threats. She made one more promise. Humanity would not ask for special treatment. Humans would not demand tribute or power. Humans would be equal partners. Nothing more. The proposal passed with almost everyone voting yes. Back on Earth, not everyone was happy. Senator Grace Kim led a group that believed humanity deserved more. Humans had fought the war. Humans had bled and died. Humans had saved the galaxy. Why should humans accept being equal to species that had done nothing? Katie returned home to answer these questions. She stood before the United Earth Council and spoke from her heart. Humanity fought to be free, she said. If we turn around and enslave others, we become what we destroyed. The cycle continues forever. Someday, some other species will rise up against us, just like we rose up against the Council. She talked about practical things too. Ruling a hostile galaxy would drain Earth's resources for generations. A galaxy of willing partners would make humanity richer and stronger than any empire of angry subjects. Senator Kim called for a vote to remove Katie from power. The vote failed badly. 3 out of 4 representatives supported Katie. The people of Earth were tired of war. They wanted peace, and they trusted Katie to build it. But not everyone on Earth wanted peace. General Victor Hayes had fought the ground battles during the war. He had watched his soldiers die on alien worlds. He had seen terrible things and done terrible things. He did not believe in forgiveness. He believed the only language the galaxy understood was strength. Hayes began quietly gathering officers who thought like him. They called themselves the Terran Guard. They waited for a chance to prove that Katie was wrong, that peace was weakness, that humanity needed to rule with an iron fist. 6 months after the war ended, that chance came. A Verati colony on the edge of explored space sent an emergency message. Unknown ships were attacking. They came out of nowhere, destroyed everything they could, and vanished before help could arrive. The attacks were precise and professional. They left no survivors. The new Galactic Assembly debated what to do. Some species wanted to send a massive fleet immediately. Others worried that military action might start a new war. Nobody could agree. Katie proposed sending a small team to investigate first. Understand the threat before attacking it. General Hayes leaked information to friendly news reporters. Stories spread that Admiral Morgan had gone soft, that she cared more about aliens than humans, that her weakness would get people killed. The pressure forced Katie to act. She agreed to lead a larger force to investigate, but she insisted on defensive rules. No shooting first. No attacking without understanding what they faced. The task force jumped to the Verati colony and found exactly what Hayes had predicted. A fleet of raiders was preparing for another attack. The ships had no markings, no flags, no identification of any kind. Katie ordered her ships into defensive positions. She tried to communicate with the raiders. She received no response. The raiders attacked. The battle lasted 4 hours. It was chaotic and bloody. The raiders fought like they did not care if they lived or died. They crashed their ships into coalition vessels rather than surrender. When it was over, the coalition had lost 16 ships and hundreds of lives. Every raider was dead. Lieutenant Commander Amy Ross examined the wreckage and found something troubling. The raiders were not unknown aliens. They were Thalaxians, former soldiers of the Council who had refused to accept the surrender. Even more troubling, intelligence suggested these raiders were just a small part of a much larger force. Somewhere in the unexplored regions of the galaxy, thousands of ships and tens of thousands of soldiers were gathering. They were led by someone called the Inheritor, who claimed to be the true ruler of the Council. Katie sat alone in her quarters and thought about what this meant. The war she thought was over was actually just beginning again. The enemy she thought she had defeated had only been hiding, waiting, growing stronger. She thought about the people who had died under her command. She thought about the people who would die in the battles to come. She thought about whether there would ever be an end to the fighting. Then she stood up, straightened her uniform, and walked to the bridge. There was work to do. There was always work to do. The galaxy was not ready for peace. But Katie Morgan was not ready to give up on it either. Admiral Katie Morgan did not sleep for 3 days after learning about the Thalaxian remnant. She read every report, studied every piece of information, and tried to understand what she was facing. Dr. Sandra Liu finally forced her to rest. She told Katie that a tired mind makes bad decisions, and the galaxy needed Katie thinking clearly. Katie slept for 6 hours. Then she called her senior staff together. The situation was worse than anyone had expected. The Thalaxian remnant was not a small group of rebels. It was a carefully organized army that had been preparing for revenge since the moment the Council surrendered. They had hidden ships and weapons in secret bases across the unexplored regions of the galaxy. Their leader, the Inheritor, had been planning this for years. Captain Nate Bishop explained the military problem. Coalition forces were spread across hundreds of star systems, keeping the peace and protecting member worlds. Gathering enough ships to attack the remnant bases would leave countless planets UNDEFEND. Chief Engineer Paul Martinez had more bad news. The remnant had upgraded their technology. Their ships were faster and more powerful than anything the Coalition had faced during the war. Lieutenant Commander Amy Ross delivered the worst news of all. The Inheritor had been talking to other species that had lost power when the Council fell. A secret alliance was forming in the shadows, ready to tear the new assembly apart. Katie listened to everything. Then she asked a question that surprised everyone. What do they want? The room went quiet. Nobody had thought to ask that. Dr. Sandra Liu spoke first. She had studied the remnants' messages and tried to understand their thinking. She believed they wanted more than just power. They wanted to prove something. The Council had ruled for thousands of years because they believed they were better than everyone else. When the Council lost the war, that belief was shattered. The remnant was not fighting for territory. They were fighting to prove that the old way was right, that some species were meant to rule and others were meant to serve. Katie nodded slowly. She had seen this kind of thinking before. Human history was full of empires that believed the same thing. She also knew that you could not beat an idea with weapons alone. You had to offer something better. The next day, Katie stood before the Galactic Assembly and made a proposal that shocked everyone listening. She wanted to invite the Inheritor to negotiate. The assembly erupted in chaos. Species that had suffered under Council rule screamed for blood. Others called Katie weak and foolish. Some demanded that she be removed from command. General Hayes watched from the viewing gallery. He had been waiting for this moment. He prepared to speak, to demand that the assembly choose a real leader who would crush the enemy without mercy. But before he could say anything, another voice cut through the noise. It was Zethvar, the Thalaxian ambassador who had been captured at the very beginning of the war. He had spent 3 years living among humans. He had watched them, learned from them, and come to understand them. He spoke to his own people through the communication systems. He told them that he had seen human kindness and human cruelty. He had seen human wisdom and human foolishness. He told them that humans were not the monsters that Council stories had described. They were just people trying to survive in a dangerous universe. He told them that the old ways had failed. The Council's power had been built on fear, and it had collapsed the moment someone stopped being afraid. Any attempt to rebuild that power would fail the same way. He begged them to accept Katie's offer. He begged them to choose a different path. The assembly fell silent. Then, one by one, representatives began voting to support negotiations. General Hayes left without speaking. The negotiations happened on a dead moon far from any inhabited world. Katie arrived with a small escort. The Inheritor arrived with 50 warships. A display of strength that fooled nobody. When they met face to face, Katie finally saw who the Inheritor really was. She was young, barely an adult by Thalaxian standards. She had been a child when the war started. She had watched her civilization collapse around her. She had sworn to avenge everything that was lost. Katie did not see an enemy. She saw someone in terrible pain. Katie told her that she understood loss. She talked about the soldiers who had died under her command. She talked about the weight of responsibility that comes with sending people into battle. She talked about the long nights when she could not sleep because she kept seeing the faces of the dead. She told the Inheritor that revenge was a circle that never ended. It could stop here with them, or it could continue for another 1,000 years until everyone was destroyed. She offered the remnant a place in the new order, not as prisoners, not as slaves, but as partners with worlds to call their own and a voice in the assembly. The Inheritor asked why humanity would show mercy to an enemy that had shown none. Katie answered honestly. She said that humans had spent most of their history showing no mercy either. Wars, conquests, terrible crimes against each other. Humanity had done everything the Council had done, and worse. But humans had also learned, slowly and painfully, that the only way forward was together. Enemies had to become friends, or everyone would lose. The Inheritor was quiet for a long time. Then she asked what guarantee she had that humanity would keep its promises. Katie offered herself. She would stay on the Remnant flagship as a hostage until the peace agreement was signed. If humanity betrayed them, they could kill her. The Inheritor asked if she was serious. Katie said she had never been more serious about anything in her life. The peace agreement was signed 3 days later. The Remnant joined the Assembly as full members. The Inheritor took a seat on the Governing Council, her voice equal to any other. General Hayes made one last attempt to stop it. He ordered soldiers loyal to him to arrest Katie for treason. The arrest team found their path blocked by Captain Nate Bishop, Chief Engineer Paul Martinez, and more than 1,000 Marines who had served under Katie's command. They refused to follow Hayes. Hayes was arrested, tried, and sentenced to prison. Katie insisted that he not be executed. The new order would not begin with killing. Katie returned to Earth as a hero, but she refused all titles and honors. She asked for only one thing, a small house by the ocean, where she could rest and remember those who had not lived to see peace. The Galactic Assembly grew stronger in the following years. Old hatred faded. Trade routes connected distant worlds. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years learned to work together. Humanity spread across the stars, not as conquerors but as partners. They shared their music and stories and ideas. They learned from other species and taught in return. In a small house by the ocean, Katie Morgan watched the sunset and smiled. She had awakened the hunting instinct of her species. But she had also proven that predators could become something more. They could become protectors. They could become builders. They could become friends. The hunt was finally over, and the future was just beginning.